The following stories were written by Franklin W. Dixon. They are currently in the public domain and are archived in the Gutenberg Project at gutenberg.org. The Hardy Boys, read by Rob Young. Hello, this is Rob. Just a reminder, if you enjoy my stories, please give them a thumbs up and consider subscribing. It really helps the channel get discovered. Thank you. The Hardy Boys, The House on the Cliff. Previously in Chapter 10, The Vain Search. The Hardy Boys' father is still missing. The brothers question many of the Bayport townfolk, but no one has seen Fenton Hardy. The boys contact Mr. and Mrs. Kane, the farmers, thinking their dad may have gone back to check on them, but they have seen nothing. A small breakthrough comes as a truck driver, Sam Bates, comes to the house to say he saw someone that looked like their dad out on the road leading to the Polucca place. The boys make a plan to go back to the Polucca house to investigate, but their mother is afraid and insists they not go alone. A group of friends volunteer to come out with Frank and Joe the next morning, although one or two are nervous about showing up at the Polucca house again. Chapter 11. The Cap on the Peg. Next morning, the searching party set out. Jerry Gilroy had not got over the scare he had received on the remarkable Saturday of the boys' first visit to the house on the cliff, and he did not show up. But Chet Morton and Biff Hooper appeared with Phil Cohen and Tony Prito, two more of the Hardy Boys' chums at the Bayport High School. Chet had his motorcycle, and the party left the Hardy home shortly after breakfast, each machine carrying two. Before they left, Frank explained the situation fully to the others. "We know that Dad was last seen near the Polucca place, and we have every reason to believe that he left here with the intention of searching the house. He hasn't shown up since, and no person has seen him, so there may have been foul play. If there is any trace of him around the Polucca place, we'll find it," declared Chet. "It will take a mighty lively ghost to scare us away this time." The three motorcycles went out of Bayport past the Tower Mansion, sped along the shore road. There was little talk among the boys. Each realized that this was not a pleasure outing, but a serious mission, and each recognized the importance of it. The Hardy Boys had every confidence in their companions. Chet and Biff, they knew, would not be as easily frightened on this occasion, and as for Phil and Tony, they were noted at school for their fearless, at times even reckless disposition. They passed the Kane farmhouse, nestling among the trees, and at last came in sight of the gloomy cliff that rose from Barmouth Bay, and at the summit of each perched the rambling stone house where the miser, Felix Polucca, had met his death. "Lonely-looking place, isn't it?" remarked Phil, who was sharing Frank's motorcycle. "It was an ideal place for a murder. When Felix Polucca lived there, I doubt if he had more than 3 visitors a year. How did he get his food and supplies?" "He used to drive into the city about once a week in a rattly old buggy with a horse that must have come out of the Ark. The poor animal looked as if it hadn't had a square meal in a lifetime. Polucca must have been a little bit crazy. How he lived alone up there all the time, nobody could understand. He worked hard enough, and he made the farm pay. No one could drive a better bargain when it came to selling his hay and grain." Phil looked with interest at the old gray house that could be seen more clearly now that they were approaching it. When they were still some distance from the lane, however, Frank brought his motorcycle to a stop and signaled to the others to do likewise. "What's the idea?" Chet asked. "We'd better sneak up on the place quietly. If we go any farther, they'll hear the motorcycles. That is, if there is anyone at the place. We'll leave them here under the trees and go ahead on foot." The motorcycles were accordingly hidden in a clump of bushes beside the road, and the six boys went on toward the lane. We'll separate here, Frank decided. Three of us will take one side of the lane, and the rest will take the other. Keep to the bushes as much as possible, and when we get near the house, lay low for a while and watch the place. When I whistle, we can come out from under cover and go on up to the house. That's a good plan, approved Tony. Joe and Biff and I will go on up the left side of the road. Good. Chet and Phil and I will take the other side. Remember to keep out of sight of the house as much as possible. The boys entered the lane, then separated according to the agreement they had made. One group plunged into the weeds and undergrowth at the edge of the lane on one side, while the others pushed into the bushes at the opposite side. In a few minutes, each group was lost to view, and only an occasional snapping and crackling of branches indicated their presence in the heavy undergrowth that flanked the lane. Frank advanced cautiously. The brushwood was much deeper than he had anticipated, and they made slow progress, for he was desirous of creeping up on the house with as little noise as possible. The undergrowth was thick and hampered their movements. They made their way forward, step by step, keeping well in from the lane, and after about 10 minutes, Frank raised his hand as a warning to the others. Through the dense thickets, he had caught a glimpse of the house. They went on cautiously until they reached the edge of the bushes, and there they crouched behind the screen of leaves, peeping out at the gloomy old stone building in the clearing. But at the first glance, an expression of surprise crossed Frank's face. The Polucca house was evidently occupied. The weeds that had overgrown the yard on their last visit had been completely cleared away. The grass had been cut, and the tumble-down fence had been repaired. The gate, which had been hanging by one hinge, had been fixed, and the grass along the pathway had been trimmed. A similar change had overtaken the house. There was glass in all the windows, and the boards had been removed. The front door had been repaired, and the steps had been mended. Smoke was rising from the kitchen chimney. There must be someone living here, whispered Chet. Frank was puzzled. He had not heard that anyone had taken the Polucca house. On account of the unenviable fame of the place, it was hardly likely that a new tenant could move in without arousing considerable comment in Bayport. But this had evidently happened. For a while the boys remained at the edge of the bushes, watching the place. Then they saw a woman come out to the clothesline at the back of the house. She carried a basket of clothes, and these she began hanging up on the line. Shortly afterward, a man came out, strode across the yard to the woodshed, and began chopping wood. The boys looked at one another in consternation. They had expected to find the same sinister and deserted place they had visited previously. Instead, they had arrived on a scene of domestic peace and comfort. They could not understand it. Not much use staying in hiding, whispered Frank. Let's get together and walk right up and question these people. He gave a low whistle, then emerged from the bushes into the lane. His companions followed. In a short time they were joined by Joe and the other boys. All were deeply puzzled by the remarkable change that had come over the Polucca place. This beats anything I've ever heard of, declared Joe. It looks as if some farmer has taken the place, but it's queer we hadn't heard of it. Everybody at Bayport would be talking about it if they knew someone had nerve enough to take over the Polucca farm. I'm not satisfied yet, Frank said. We'll go up and question these people. Accordingly, the six boys walked boldly out of the lane and across the yard. The man in the woodshed saw them first and put down his axe, staring at them with an expression of annoyance on his face. The woman at the clothesline heard their footsteps and turned facing them, her hands upon her hips. She was hard-faced and tight-lipped with gaunt features. She was not prepossessing, and her untidy garb did not impress the boys favorably. "What do you want?" demanded the man, emerging from the woodshed. He was short and thin, with close-cropped hair, and he was in need of a shave. His complexion was swarthy, and he had narrow eyes under coarse black brows. His manner was far from polite as he advanced upon the boys. At the same time, another man came out of the kitchen and stood on the steps. He was stout and red hair and had a thick mustache. As he stood there in his shirt sleeves, he glared pugnaciously at the sextet. "Yeah, what's the big idea?" he asked. "We didn't know anyone was living here," explained Frank, edging over to the kitchen door. He wanted to get a look inside the house, if possible. "Well, there is," said the red-haired man. "We're living here now, and I can't see that it's any of your business. What are you snooping around here for?" "We aren't snooping," said Frank quietly. "We are looking for a man who's disappeared from Bayport." "Humph!" grunted the woman. "What makes you think he might be around here?" asked the red-headed man. "He was last seen in this neighborhood." "What's his name?" "Hardy." "What does he look like?" "Tall and dark. He was wearing a gray suit and a gray cap." "Ain't nobody around here since we moved in," said the red-haired man gruffly. "No, we didn't see him," snapped the woman. "You boys had better go and look somewhere else." There was nothing to be gained by arguing with the unsociable trio, so the boys started to leave. But Frank, who had edged close to the open door during the course of the conversation, had glanced into the kitchen, and something had caught his eye. It was a gray cap hanging on a peg. Hello. I hope you are enjoying these adventures of Frank and Joe Hardy. Be sure to check back next week when we will have a new chapter.